The future use of energy in Louisiana. We'll talk about the science and the ecosystem building there on today's Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists, entrepreneurs, and their supporters. Energy use. You've probably thought about that. How do we use science in practical applications? We're going to look at a program called the NSF Engines that many of you may know well. We're going to look at a specific program, the future use of energy in Louisiana, Fuel, one of those NSF engines. And to do that, I'm joined by Michael Mazzola, Executive Director and CEO of Fuel, Lacy McManus, a Workforce Development Director at Fuel, and Mike Butler, one of their partners, the Public and Government Affairs Manager at ExxonMobil. Michael, Lacy, and Mike, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, guys, I am fascinated about ecosystem approaches. I'm fascinated about these topics and the challenges. We're going to get to some of that. But Michael, I'm hoping you can just help level set us for a sec. Give us the briefest kind of what's the NSF engines, what's Fuel specifically to level set, and we'll go from there.
Engines, the NSF Engines program is the flagship program of the newest directorate created by an act of Congress called the Technology and Innovation Partnerships Directorate at NSF, led by Dr. Erwin Ganchandani. And this program announced about 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago, originally 10, now active, not 9 active engines across the country. And after a incredibly challenging competition, and I hate to say it, but I'm sitting in Houston, Texas right now. Houston and Louisiana went neck and neck in this program, and Louisiana prevailed. So we were one of the 9.
Not that you're keeping score or anything, Michael.
Well, but we're still friends because Fuel is about future-proofing the future of energy in the Gulf Coast production region, one of the most important in the world, and making sure that the economic prosperity that it brings all of us continues indefinitely. So what we've all won is a 10-year generational change opportunity with a federal investment in each engine worth up to $160 million. But like any smart investor, they do it in 3 tranches. So we are right on the cusp of working toward transitioning to year 3, 4, and 5.
So, Michael, maybe you hit on one of the obvious tensions. We technically have reported on many federally funded research program like this. There's always a tension. Dollars go locally. Lots of folks want to see how it affects locally. But the point of putting federal dollars into something is supposed to be something that benefits all of us. So I guess maybe let's take some touches at the Louisiana lens, what's so valuable, and the wider lens. Lacy, in the workforce sense, could you maybe take a swing at me? Like, why should the good people of Louisiana care about fuel like this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, it's so interesting because as a Louisiana native, my family's been in the state for generations, well over 100 years. And we have always been so deeply tied to energy production as a key economic asset across the state of Louisiana. So the idea that we're an energy state, that we're continuing to maintain jobs and prosperity through energy, that's not necessarily novel or net new in and of itself. But the conversation has shifted on the ground in Louisiana over probably the last 10, 15 years or so, as we talk about new energy projects coming online, new economic development announcements, making headlines. There's a lot of folks in communities who are saying, yeah, but those jobs don't come to me. They don't come to my children, my grandchildren, my neighbors. I don't see a future for myself or my line within this economic landscape. And so what I think is so exciting about Fuel from the workforce perspective is that we can open up that aperture and start to reintroduce what some of these roles, skills, and opportunities are for forthcoming generations. But more than just introduce, we can actually strategically and really thoughtfully, in partnership with our industry partners like ExxonMobil and with some of our community partners, our school districts, our 2-year community colleges, our 4-year schools, build pipelines directly into those jobs. Now, in some cases, those pipelines have existed for decades and maybe been forgotten or been taken a back burner. In other cases, we're talking about net new opportunities. And that's what I think is so critical critical about having this engines approach is that as we are pushing forward with new innovative technologies, some of which are being born and bred in Louisiana right now, we can simultaneously instruct, prepare, and inform our workforce partners in that potential labor pool about that new class of opportunity coming online as well. So it really is a full spectrum approach, not just a one single shot or single bite at an apple, for example. And that to me is what I think is going to be game changing about this program for our Louisiana communities. I think we have a long way to go to continue building trust in many of our communities, with many of our neighbors, with many of our populations. But we are, in my view, off to an exceptionally strong start, given our generational legacy in the energy space and the suite of partners we've already brought on board.
I will admit I wouldn't expect you to say anything other than you think it's successful, but I'm glad to hear that you do, because that's like table stakes. All right. So Mike, I'm going to come at you with a little more challenging a question, but because this is what I am a believer in an ecosystem approach, that you want these many different species interacting, right? Like kind of the definition of that ecosystem metaphor. But whenever I see very smart people telling me everything's going great, I'm like, I don't believe you, because I know there are challenges. You just can't. It's like not possible. So Mike, talk to me a little bit about ecosystem approach. Fuel is, like all the NSF engines, inspiring in that the ideal is we're going to get together, cutting edge research. We're going to get together our corporate citizens. We're going to get together the stakeholders locally and nationally, and we're going to solve workforce. And we're going to get entrepreneurship involved. Sounds great. I know not all that can happen. So talk to me a little bit, Mike, about what your seat, what you think an ecosystem approach looks like. Michael, I'll come to you too. But Mike, I'm curious, how do you view that ecosystem approach happening here?
Yeah, great question. I mean, for us, a couple things at ExxonMobil is one of the things we're strong believer in is the whole STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so one of the things we believe in is that in the future, we need a more skilled and developed workforce. And we think the way to do that is to introducing young men and women to STEM activities. And so when we became aware of the great work Fuel's doing in Louisiana, we have a long history in Louisiana. Some of the things they're working on Lacy and Michael touched on around workforce development really appeal to us, because we need in the future, we're going to need more skilled labor. And it's not just engineering scientists, it's skilled labor with the advances in technology. And with that, what we see is this ecosystem of partnering with Fuel, universities, private sector like ExxonMobil, contributing and then developing communities is not only an economic benefit to the local communities in Louisiana, but it's good paying jobs. It supports ExxonMobil's efforts to maintain businesses there with skilled labor. And so I think it's I would say ecosystem, it's a nice marriage of things that community, university, and private sector can come together to affect some change that's needed by all of the private sector. We need skilled labor, the university trying to grow the workforce, and then just good paying jobs at the end of the day is what I think really can speak to a lot of people. And so what Fuel was doing, we saw what they were doing. We thought it would be a wonderful partnership, and it has been so far. And what I like about Fuel and what we at ExxonMobil do, it's not just kind of giving money, it's actively participation, and it's a true partnership where we hold ourselves to standards and with Fuel as well, metrics, and trying to make sure we're actually making a difference in the dollars and being good stewards of those dollars. But really it's about kind of elevating, in particular for Louisiana in this instance, elevating not only the community but the workforce, and making sure these young kids, men and women, are prepared to go into this new kind of brave new world, if you will.
So, Michael, I want to come over to you, because Mike, what I hear out of Mike's point is when you're doing a kind of ecosystem building, anyone who's done this work knows it is impossible for everyone to be misaligned or be aligned. I've gone to the number of places around this country who goes, it's not all going perfect. And I'm like, I know, because it doesn't go perfect anywhere. And if you tell me otherwise, it's a lie. So what I hear Mike talking about is, it's about finding where there is alignment. Like that's the ecosystem building work. It's like, hey, look, this workforce thing over here, we may disagree on a lot, but this part we kind of all agree on. That's what I hear coming out of Mike's point. Michael, I wonder if you can give me a case study. Do you have a favorite startup that's commercialized something or others? And is there a kind of like life cycle that will help us begin to see how it's working at Fuel, and we can then widen a bit more? So give me a kind of life cycle example.
Sure. And Chris, the the real point is that this program is about people in place. And as an electrical engineer by profession, I'm sort of trained to look for the evidence. And the evidence for value of making targeted investments in people in place is that you will create and discover that there are natural, sometimes a century in the making skill sets that are concentrated in an area. And in the case of energy production, of the conventional energy production, is where the resources are. And so the Gulf Coast region is a prime example of that. So what you expect, and what I'll call the ivory tower academic justification for something like the Engines program, is that by proximity, innovators will get connected to entrepreneurs. And that's really the underlying principle. So
yes,
looking around, we knew that theory. And before I was here practically a month, I discovered that the theory was already in action. So the evidence was there. So great little story about a startup company called Encore CO2. They're one of our lead companies, one of our first 5 that were awarded proof of concept fund awards out of the Fuel Engines program. But the story of how it got started is just illustrates why you can grow this thing exponentially if you're in the right place with the right people. A distinguished professor by the name of Dr. John Flake at LSU, decades of experience in chemical engineering, developed some through research technology for electrolyzing carbon dioxide to turn it into a valuable chemical, ethanol. And there's others as well. And that's how the chemical engineering industry on the river, as I like to say here in Mississippi, works, is that they're taking feedstocks and they're creating something of greater value that comes out of it. But they often use their waste and put it back into the system to create other things. So it's a very, very thrifty industry. And so the next stage in carbon management is to use the CO2, not emit the CO2. And so John's technology is about doing that. But he's a career academic like I was. I happened to be a co-founder of a company that grew TRL1 to TRL9. But not every professor is interested in doing that. But he was going to the gym for 2 years with another local guy by the name of William McGee, who's an attorney and was running a microbrewery here. And it took him 2 years to compare notes and say, and John finally told him, William, you take feedstocks, biofeedstocks, grain, and turn it into ethanol and emit the CO2. I'm interested in taking your CO2 and creating the ethanol directly. Or you know what they said, we're going to start a company. But then they had a missing link. They had to have a risk-tolerant STEM professional, because William's an attorney. And John wasn't leaving the university at LSU. Louisiana State University is where he's his faculty appointment. And so they John pointed to one of his very promising students, a lady by the name of Jordan Lasavio, who was working on her PhD in chemical engineering. But she had been in the energy industry in California. She was born and raised in Louisiana, educated here, and then went off, as so many of our potential innovators do in Louisiana, outflow to other places, gathered 5 years of experience, got married, had 2 kids, wanted to come back, as so many of our Louisiana diaspora want to do. And her husband had a job, so she could be risk tolerant in joining this firm. And now they're one of the storied companies that are growing up in Louisiana right now. So the people in place, the evidence, it was incredible.
So thank you for that.
We were so excited to be one of the early investors in that company.
Well said. And thank you for that cycle. So from my outside perspective, going on 20 years covering this kind of federal research, workforce programs so deeply necessary, as Mike and Lacy alluded to, but ultimately in service of, we're trying to commercialize advanced science and bring it to market. That's the thing that theoretically every American citizen would say, why do I care about the NSF engines? Because we're trying to take breakthrough science, match it with ways to commercialize it, bring it to market in a way that can make all of us richer, healthier, safer. That's what I have viewed the NSF engines as a fascinating and attempt here at can we bring breakthrough science to the market more quickly. So that illustration is great, Michael. All right, I got a little more time with you guys, so let's move to a couple other points that I'm hoping to hit on here. Lacy, give me a workforce case study and maybe hit on a couple points for me. One challenge that I've heard before: federal dollars are excellent for starting a thing, not always excellent for sustaining a thing long term. And there are lots of stories of successful workforce programs and ones that aren't as successful. What have you kind of learned or seen? What's working and what's not about the workforce strategy as you see it here, and what best practices are happening at Fuel?
That's a great example. I'll quote Mike in this. One of the charges that Mike Mazzola, my boss,
we have strict rules. Michael's only allowed to be Michael on this call, Lacy.
Ping pong back and forth between the two Hollywood squares here. What Michael Mazzola likes to tell us often is we need to find the coalition of the willing, right? We need to capital stack our programs. We need to go where there's already momentum. And so frankly, that's one of the first things that I did when I stepped into this role almost exactly a year ago, was identify where in the original grant proposal there was already initiatives and activities that had traction, either with state funding, federal funding, local funding, that were already moving forward, that we could then add an additional layer onto and or direct more with an energy focus and energy specificity around to make sure that long-term funding was indeed able to be attached to some of our early investments. So we put out about January of last year, we released an open RFP with 4 different priority workforce areas. And we put it out into the Louisiana landscape. We said, look, this is what we're aiming to do. Here's our qualifications. Here's our judging criteria. We have funding for about 14 programs that might meet this bar. And we received 70 responses from across the Louisiana ecosystem with different projects that were attempting to do just that, to align with us on that workforce mission. And one of the key qualifications was you need to have some level of sustainable funding, if not in place, at least a foresight into what that sustainable funding mechanism could be. So it was a very competitive proposal process. We put together a team of folks who really looked through those applications very stringently, and about 13 applications were awarded at the end of the day. And one that I think has shown the most promise and has been so incredibly compelling, especially from the funding perspective, is actually an initiative that we co-funded with Exxon, with Sewella Community College, working with Sewella as sort of the intermediary, if you will, that community resource for a number of rural parishes in Southwest Louisiana. So working through and with Sewella Technical Community College, we were able to provide a very intensive, extremely high quality teacher professional development experience for a range of teachers coming from, I think, 3 or 4 parishes, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, right? Jeff Davis, Beauregard, Allen Parish, I'm probably missing one in that mix in the Southwest Louisiana area. And honestly, when I read the proposal, it was incredibly compelling and I was all in on it. But it wasn't until I got to the actual teacher demonstration day at the end of this week of professional development with these teachers, mostly in high school, but some middle school as well. And I saw what they had put together in 1 week that they were then taking back to their classrooms to combine and integrate into their existing curriculum. I was blown away. It was literally, here are the CCUS modules, the processes, how to create a business plan around a CCU related startup. It was deep, intensive carbon management technologies that they were able to understand, distill, and then replicate into their curriculum for the months to come. And so while we were able to fund that and get that going with $100,000 from the fuel fund and from our NSF engines resources, Mike and his team with Exxon were so thrilled with the outcomes. They actually have matched that initial investment to the tune of what, Mike, $325,000 at this point, to keep that going, because the ROI isn't just for fuel, right? At the end of the day, the return on the investment is for Exxon. So I think those kinds of co-funding models, bringing bringing industry to the table at the beginning, outset, throughout the process, to co-invest alongside those initial capital infusions from fuel. That to me is a model that we will certainly continue to explore and has a lot of legs. This isn't an educational program going seeking sponsorship here and there after a program has wrapped or when they have an initial concept in mind from the beginning. It's co-designing and instigating from the jump with an industry partner. And Mike, if you're welcome to add on to that as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, I think everything you said is spot on, and what we really liked about it was the opportunity, and Lacy talked to kind of stack on and to we found, with the work that Fuel was doing, it was aligned with some of our needs, our efforts, and some of the ways we try to give back to the community. And so by partnering with these type organizations like Fuel and the local community college, I think we're able to scale kind of what not only ExxonMobil can offer, but Fuel, what the local community college can offer. And so I think it broadens the aperture for reaching more people, developing technical skills, that good paying jobs, and it just benefits not only us with a robust workforce, opportunities, the community, and so we saw it as a win-win, and we were so pleased with the work that Fuel did, and the collaboration that, like Lacy just said, I was in Southwest Louisiana just last week, making another donation to continue the program going forward. So we're bullish on these collaborations, these ecosystems where we can partner with people with similar interests and trying to advance good paying jobs, community, and really workforce development. We're going to need a lot of skilled labor going forward. And so as anything we can do to support that, particularly in states where we operate, is something we're very interested in.
In a second here, I'm going to wrap us with just the future looking question. But Michael, you can inspire in this leadership role. So I'd love to hear you wax a bit on what I think the core challenge would be, that like Louisiana's about our energy past. How could Louisiana be about our energy future?
Well, that is a question that innovation can answer, Chris. And I'm very pleased to say that the Fuel Partnership, all of our partners recognize that. That's why they joined, not just because of specific interests right now, like ExxonMobil has Mike
is that just cut out just for me? Mike, are you still there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I believe that the key question. I might have just lost Michael. Mike, I guess could you speak to Louisiana's energy past? How could Louisiana be about energy future?
Yeah, no, I think that's
which, of course, you would know, Mike, that you would get challenged in that individually, right? Of course,
right.
So
yeah. I mean, we briefly. I mean, obviously, we have a long, very proud history of operating in Louisiana. We even today we still have state of the art refineries, chem plants, pipelines, lube plants, fuels terminals, and all of that. But as society goes through this energy transition, ExxonMobil's not standing still, right? We're actively involved. We stood up a few years ago a whole business called Low Carbon Solutions, and one of the things we're actively looking at in Louisiana is carbon capture and sequestration. That's where we'll partner with hard to capture emitters, concrete plants, fertilizers, refineries. Will capture that CO2, transport it through pipeline, and then store it underground, thousands and thousands of feet underground. And Louisiana is uniquely positioned to be a major player in the Gulf Coast on carbon capture sequestration because of the geology there. And so we have a number of projects and things we're looking at. But I think Louisiana, not only for their supply chain and where they are, the Gulf Coast is ideally located for future kind of new energies, if you will, as we go into this transition. So I think I can't think of any better state where ExxonMobil thinks that there's opportunity for growth, and not just the traditional, which will still be required, but as we move through this transition, I think Louisiana not only has the geographic, the geology, but what we're trying to do with Lacy and Michael is we want them to have world-class workforce. So I think it's all kind of, again, your ecosystem, literally from the state to the people, to the companies, to the technology, to the direction. I think the opportunity for Louisiana is very bright if we can all deliver on kind of those goals.
I'm about to leave you, so I'll throw it to you, Michael, on the other side of technical difficulties. When I call you up here 3 to 5 years from now and say, "What'd you do with my federal tax dollars?" What's going to be your signal of success?
Well, that we've achieved our number 1 and number 2 goals, which are 60 companies and 80% of them building wealth in Louisiana, and well on our way to achieving our $2 billion of economic impact through wealth creation in using innovation in carbon management in Louisiana.
Michael Mazzola of Fuel, alongside his colleague Lacy McManus on the workforce side of Fuel, and Mike Butler of ExxonMobil. Michael, Lacy, and Mike, thanks for your time so much.
Thanks, Chris.
It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time on Builders Live. Bye.